Lopez wants it away. And it's hit deep to left center. Andrew Jones on the run. This one has a chance. Home run! Mike Piazza and the Mets lead 3-2. Bartolo has done it! The impossible has happened! This is one of the great moments in the history of baseball.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mets fans of all ages, here is your host, Nick Durst. Hello, Mets fans. Welcome back to another episode of Bleav in the Mets. I'm your host, Nick Durst, and the season is almost finally over. It's not great that they're not going to be going to the playoffs, of course, but the good news is we're closer to the offseason, and that's where the fun is really going to begin. Will Billy Eppler and the Mets stick to their word to Max Scherzer and not be aggressive in free agency? Who knows? But they do have a new man in charge who's going to make a lot of decisions as far as that goes, and that is David Stearns. So joining me now in order to discuss David Stearns, you may have seen him on Pix 11, heard him on WFAN, heard him on Rutgers pre and post game, or seen him or heard him all over the place. He is one of the hardest working men in sports, the Moose, Marc Malusis. Moose, thank you to the show. Really excited to have you here. Curious, so you're going to be at David Stearns' introductory press conference, and if so, if you get the chance to ask him a question, what's the first thing that's going to be coming out of your mouth?
Yeah, I would probably ask him about control. How much control does he have now taking over as president of baseball operations? Obviously, Cohen owns the team, and it's Cohen's money. But, what does that collaborative process look for the Mets? That would be the issue, and then you can get into obviously the future of Buck and, Billy Eppler reportedly is going to remain as general manager. That's fine. But you would have to imagine a guy that the Mets waited for a couple years to bring over from the Milwaukee Brewers, because he's been the apple of the eye of Steve Cohen now for the better part of 24 months, that you would think that he's coming in here with that, hefty long-term deal, that he's going to have a lot of control within the organization.
So he's kind of come in now, like you said, he was highly coveted. You would think all the power would be his. I think it's really bizarre that Eppler is secure and is going to be there. Maybe Epler's there because of his ties to Japan, and all these Japanese players are going to be available here. For Stearns, do you think he's going to come in and kind of do a wait-and-see approach, or do you think he's been watching this last year very closely as an advisor for the Brewers, and he's going to go ahead and make some immediate changes right away in the offseason?
Well, I would think that, number one, it depends on, you came into the intro and talking about the offseason, is what they told Max Scherzer going to be correct? I think that's really the $1 million question. Like, are you looking at it and saying, okay, are the Mets going to be super aggressive in free agency? There's a report that they're going to make the biggest offer to Shohei Ohtani. Is that necessarily the case? Are they going to go make a play and try and trade for Juan Soto from the San Diego Padres? Or is this going to be kind of an approach where they want to develop some of their younger players, and it's going to be 2-3 years out? There's still a massive issue when you're looking at this starting rotation outside of Kodai Senga. So they need to add some quality arms to that starting rotation. It's great going to be Edwin Diaz back. I think that's really the first question needs to be asked. What's the aggressiveness going to be? But I would have to believe, and I like Buck, I do. I don't think he's done a great job this year managing the team. I thought he did an unbelievable job last year. I don't think necessarily this team struggled because of Buck's managerial style, but I don't think he necessarily had one of his better years managing. With that, though, if I'm Stearns, if I'm going to be given full autonomy, then I'm going to be given control, and I would have to believe I'd want to bring in a manager that is going to, carry out my vision within the dugout. Maybe his vision is Buck Showalter. Maybe they see eye to eye on everything here moving forward, and he remains. But that's an interesting conversation of where this team is. Are they a scenario where they're more aggressive than reported 2-3 months ago in free agency? If it's a wait-and-see approach, then do you bring in a manager that's more of a developmental guy? Buck has done that in the past, but clearly – he's been around Major League Baseball for a long, long time.
So to me, I think you should bring Buck back. What's the alternative? Is it really Eric Chavez? He hasn't proven as a bench coach this year that he's ready to be the manager. I know they're trying to maybe groom him, but the Mets situationally this year have taken a step back with Chavez going from hitting coach to bench coach. I think Glenn Sherlock did a good job last year. Now with Buck, though, you mentioned the rebuild. If he wants to take the Nets are going to take a step back. I think he doesn't want to do that, but he'll say yes, I'll stay on because of his age. He's not going to probably get another shot after this, so I think he'd be okay with waiting that out. As far as the connections with Stearns, everyone's saying, oh, well, Craig Counsell, he's going to be available. He's doing a great job with the Brewers. Well, he didn't hire him, so that doesn't necessarily mean because they both came from Milwaukee, he'd want to go there. I think if you're going to go into the rebuild mode type of year, or let's develop the young guys, you're probably going to go with a first-time manager again. We know how great that's worked out for the Mets the past decade. But if they're going to go in that route, I guess you might as well bring back an all-time great manager who never lost the game for the Mets, Carlos Beltran.
Right. Well, right. Maybe Carlos Beltran indeed does get another shot to manage a major league team. Yeah, I think it's interesting. I really do. But I also think the impact, Nick, of the major league manager has lessened over the last 5 to 10 years because I think there's a lot of people at the table. There's a lot of men and women that are in baseball organizations that have a say when you're looking at how a roster is put together, how a pitcher is used. Not necessarily, you're calling down to the dugout in terms of what reliever to go into a matchup, but managers are not given autonomy. You're not handed the roster and say, hey, manage this team as you see fit. No, that's no longer the case. We know that's no longer the case. So you got to be a manager now in Major League Baseball that work and plays well with others. And you got to be into the collaborative process. You got to be into analytics. You got to be into all those things. I think there's a lot that needs to be answered after what was a disastrous season for the Mets and the amount of money that was spent. And I think they did the right thing, not chasing their tail at the MLB trade deadline by, using Cohen's greatest asset, which is his wealth, to try and improve this Met farm system and pairing off guys like Scherzer, Verlander, Mark Canha, and realizing that it wasn't going to work this year.
Yeah, they got rid of Tommy Pham, and he's in the news now because he's apparently talking about the Mets' poor work ethic of course, across the season. This team just didn't click this year, and it all started with that Verlander spring training injury, and of course Diaz's injury, and going back to not getting Correa. I know Correa isn't having a great year, but look at the alternatives here. Escobar, he was terrible. Brett Beatty's batting 200. Vientos is batting 200. Are the Mets really going to go into next year with Vientos and Beatty again at third base? I don't know. If they're going to try to win, then they can't give us those guys and say this is the roster.
Well, but let me ask you, it depends, right? I mean, what exactly then do you do? Okay, so say if I have a scenario where Ronnie Mauricio is my second baseman, Lindor's at short, the stuff, Alonso's going to be your first baseman. Yep. I think he's going to be your first baseman for a long, long time. And I don't think Met fans are bothered by that, the fact that he's hitting 45 home runs this year. You have Alvarez behind home plate, Nimmo in center field. Say you go out and make a trade for, say, a Juan Soto, and then you have McNeil playing some left.
Sure.
Or McNeil, so say if you have Juan Soto and you plug him into right field, could you survive then? Yes. With you
need to fix the offense. You can't run back the same offense for the
No, I get it. I get it, but you can find some answers within, but you also have to add, I would probably tell you, and I'd agree with you, an impact bat. I mean, Alonso, Lindor, and Nimmo are a nice start. You liked what you've seen here, even though he's run very, very hot and cold to the power with Francisco Alvarez behind home plate, and he has not been a disaster defensively either. I still think I've maintained, even after what Eppler told Scherzer to get him to agree to a deal to the Texas Rangers, Steve Cohen's not here to sit on his hands. He wants to win. He set that 3 to 5 year window to try and win a World Series. He swung for the fences this year. It didn't work. You know what? They admitted their mistake and they moved on. I still think this organization is going to be aggressive this offseason. And that's why I think David Stearns was so interested in getting here. Aside from the fact he's a local and everything that history with the organization, was there under Omar Minaya 16 years ago, has had success with the Milwaukee Brewers, is the opportunity now to be in a major market here in New York, trying to deliver a World Series title for the first time since '86, and you're working for the richest singular owner in all of Major League Baseball. There are a lot of positives when it comes along with that.
Yeah, that's the Steve Cohen effect, and he impacts everything greatly with the money. Anybody would want to work here, I would think. because you get the money to spend. And if I'm a player, a high-profile free agent, whether I heard that Steve Cohen doesn't want to spend it out this offseason, the first thing I'm telling my agent to do is go ahead, call Billy Eppler, call Stearns, or go straight to Steve Cohen. We saw Boris do that last year with Correa, and find out if you're willing to pay. Obviously, Matt Chapman's available and some other guys in that tier. Not necessarily the way I would say the Mets should go in that direction, but all these free agents are going to inquire and get the interest, and that's what you're going to see. And then the question, like we mentioned before, is Ohtani. Obviously, he's not going to pitch next year, so maybe that lessens his value. But if he's willing to come to the East Coast, I fully expect that Cohen's going to make an offer. And even if he's just a DH, that immensely improves the team offensively next year.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, let's – and I don't – the quote-unquote elbow surgery that he had and that he's not going to pitch until 2025, and we know that he suffered a UCL injury. Shohei Ohtani is an unbelievable, iconic baseball player. He's going to be the MVP of the American League. I don't care that the Angels didn't win. They didn't win with Mike Trout either. I mean, and that's not the way Major League Baseball works. This is not the NBA. There's not a case where one player can all of a sudden change the course and the context of a team. You need a lot of things to happen right for your team to go out there and win consistently in Major League Baseball. So I don't hold that. And now all the people that say that, I mean, they don't know baseball and they don't watch it like you and I, Nick, on a day in, day out basis. Yeah, I would imagine. Not only the fact of how great of a player he is, he hits for average and power. It's not like he's hitting, 185 and hitting bomb after bomb after bomb, but he's also unbelievably marketable.
Yep.
You think about the money that you're going to be able to make having Shohei Ohtani in your ballpark, 81 home dates, the amount of people that are going to be drawn. Listen, Artie Moreno had the fear of death of pairing off Shohei Ohtani because he was like, it's going to greatly affect our home attendance with the Angels because people want to see, obviously, Shohei Ohtani. Yeah, I would imagine Cohen. I would imagine the Yankees who were interested in him before. You mentioned it, though. The big question, Nick, is I don't know. I have not seen it anywhere. Maybe someone has seen it. I haven't seen it anywhere. I don't know if he wants to play on the East Coast. He might be a guy that just wants to play out West. And if he wants to just play out West, regardless of what the Yankees or the Mets offer or what Cohen offers, he's not going to come here.
Yeah, I would say the Dodgers and the Padres should be considered the favorites, and we'll take it from there. But Kodai Senga, okay, he's been phenomenal this year. He's going to finish runner-up for Rookie of the Year, most likely, to Corbin Carroll. He'll be top 4 in Cy Young. And now you're talking about the Mets offseason. Their top target's going to be Yamamoto from Japan.
Yeah.
So if there's something here where, let's say you get both of these guys now, does that help or hurt your pursuit for Ohtani? Does he want to maybe play with his national team members? And now you're looking at a chance where, you always talk about the 6-man rotation. Well, if you have 3 guys from Japan in 2025, you're probably going to have that 6-man rotation because they're used to that. So do you think that would have any impact on the Ohtani sweepstakes?
Yeah, great question. I have no idea. Great question, Nick. I'm not sure. I mean, maybe, I think it would probably help. I mean, a lot of people perceive it's going to help the Mets' pursuit of Yamamoto, the fact that he and Kodai Senga have the same agent, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it just comes down to the amount of money that's going to be offered. I think it probably plays a role. I think you want to be around guys that you like playing with. But I couldn't tell you one way or the other if it's significantly like so say if he's okay to play it on the East Coast and, Shohei Ohtani is looking at it and saying, well, I want to make the money, but I want to put myself in the best possible position to win. And the Dodgers have the same financial package that the Mets have, give or take. Does that mean he's going to come to the Mets or is he going to sign with the Dodgers? Because the Dodgers, even when, they always find ways to win baseball games. So I don't know if necessarily I think the fact that Kodai's here probably helps the Mets with Yamamoto. I don't know if necessarily that ends up being the cherry on the top and finalizes a deal for them to go get Shohei Ohtani.
So for Senga, he's been sensational this year. I know you are well into the betting verse. Would you put a little bet down, a future bet for Senga to potentially win the Cy Young next year? Do you think there's a sophomore slump or regression, or do you think he's going to be better?
I think he's good. I mean, I think the only thing with Senga has been, which was the concern when scouts looked at him coming over from Japan, was, adjusting to pitching every fifth day, and we've seen that be an issue at times during the regular season. The other one was control. The Ghost Fork is an unbelievable pitch. I mean, it just is. And he's had some lights out performances this year. So if you're asking me, okay, is this kind of like a flash in the pan for Kodai Senga? No. I would venture to guess that you're going to have more of this to come. Now, is he going to be to the level where he's going to win a Cy Young in the National League? I don't know if I necessarily see that just yet, but if he is a dependable, number 2, number 3 in the Mets rotation, I think he's a winning pitcher. I mean, I think he's a guy that can help you get to the playoffs and help you maybe make the Atlanta Braves sweat a little bit in the National League East. Now he needs a ton of help, but I think he's a big piece to it.
Yeah, and certainly the best thing has been his durability, and I also love his demeanor, where he's giving up 2 runs in 6 innings, and he's saying after the game he's very disappointed in his pitching performance. He needs to do better, and overall it's been a great year for him, and he's been an absolute bargain at 5 years, $90 million the first year into his contract. So great job by Billy Eppler right there to sign him, and the money helps, of course. But the 2024 roster I want to talk about here. The Mets, they traded at the deadline, as you mentioned, for Gilbert, Clifford, the outfielders. They also acquired 4 shortstops. Well, they have Francisco Lindor for 10 more years. Mauricio is up there. So I don't know where all these guys are going to play, and I'm curious to your thoughts. Do you think Stearns is going to look to trade these guys, or wants to hold them to watch them closely for another year? Because I think, like you mentioned, they need starting pitching, and I would say the Mets are probably going to be in on Glass now, because the Rays are not going to re-sign him. Bieber, because the Guardians are not going to re-sign him. They always trade their players. And then you look at Corbin Burns with the Brewers. I think that's another person that Mets could be tied to. You have all these prospects that are position players. You don't have any really top-end pitchers. So to me, it looks like, looking at this offseason, I would expect some of these guys, even if they just acquired them at the deadline, to be dealt for starting pitching.
Yeah, I think you're reading the room right. I mean, I think, first off, I don't get prospects or prospects. So if I'm an organization, I'm trying to add as much quality talent as I possibly can, and I'll let the competition kind of play out and see who exactly lands where and who ends up being the best. And maybe I end up having an embarrassment of riches where I have 3 or 4 major league caliber shortstops that can all play. Then you know what, those guys, I'm going to have something to deal from, and other teams are going to be calling me. So I don't necessarily ever go and say, no, I don't want to take this guy because I already have 2 shortstops. Maybe I take a prospect that might have a little bit lesser value, a little less top end, because he's an outfielder or whatever it might be. So that doesn't bother me. Yeah, I think it's going to be a case where if I expect the Mets are going to be aggressive this offseason, and I do, and be aggressive in free agency, and if Ohtani wants to play on the East Coast, that they're going to be a major player for Shohei Ohtani and Yamamoto, who we've talked about, then I would have to imagine that Stearns is going to deal from that farm system to go and acquire other major league caliber talent and guys that can help the Mets in 2024. I'm not telling you they're all going to go, because I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case. But if there's a deal to be made, if you can go get, Juan Soto, and it's not because he's only got 1 year left to control for San Diego before he hits free agency, and it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg like it did San Diego going to get him from Washington, then yeah, I think some of those guys are going to go.
Yeah, I would not hesitate to trade Acuna for Juan Soto, assuming you think you could re-sign him. And that, that's like the top prospect, but as you mentioned, they're just prospects. If you're never going to get a known commodity, and if you get a Soto, although I think Soto, if he is traded, I'm sure the Yankees will try to empty the tank for him, but who knows what they have there. But the Mets right now, Jet Williams is off a really strong year. He's a shortstop. He's someone I would look to trade. The only guy I really would say let's not trade right now, which I'm worried they might because of his great September here, is Ronnie Mauricio. I think you need to let this guy play out. You got to see what he's able to do next year. I think he should start next year, whether it's at third base or second base or left field. How impressed have you been by Mauricio right now? And do you think that they called him up maybe 4 months too late? Because that's
I think they were patient. I think a couple things. I mean, the patience that they showed you, they'll blame on the defense, and they'll tell you that he needed to learn more at AAA Syracuse, and they weren't comfortable with it. There had to be something else. Like there's something missing from the conversation about why the Mets were so strong in the idea of not calling Ronnie Mauricio up? Were they in fear that he was going to get exposed on the major league level and looked at him more as a AAA and a half ball player? I don't know, but not every internal scout with every major league team has been correct. I mean, there were a lot of people within the Mets at the time that never thought Pete Alonso could consistently play first base because he had DH written all over him. Pete Alonso is not Keith Hernandez at first.
Smith was the top prospect.
Right. And Pete Alonso is not Keith Hernandez defensively at first base, but he's also not Jason Giambi either. Right. So, you can live with Alonso defensively at first base. So some of those scouts are wrong. I don't know what it is. Clearly, they had a fear of him and the exposure on the major league level. I think he's shown you enough. I think he should have been called up sooner. I think he became kind of the main talking point, and you know this, Nick, and you talked about on this podcast, his game became the more talking point because he got tired of seeing Daniel Vogelback getting at bats. And you're like, why are we seeing Vogelback here? Why can't we get Ronnie Mauricio at bats? What would be the harm there? And I think he showed you the bat plays, the exit velocity plays, the launch angle plays. He's a good offensive player. I'll take that in today's day and age, and I'll deal with any kind of defensive issues that might the perception of those defensive issues that might be there.
Sadly, the highlight of the season would have to be when the Citi Field had hockey night and Mauricio had his first home run, and they played the Rangers goal song as he rounded the bases and fireworks were shooting off out of the
Love that.
Tremendous.
It's almost hockey season. Can you sense it? Falls in the air this upcoming weekend, the first weekend of autumn. Can you sense it? Hockey is in the air.
Looking forward to the Stadium Series this winter.
No
last
doubt.
time the Mets played at Citi Field, pretty good. So they always do good outside. The Rangers outside. So looking forward to that. And last thing here, we kind of discussed it a little bit before, but that is Pete Alonso. I've been harping every week on the show. Come on, get this guy an extension. You'd be crazy to trade him because you're not going to replace 45 and 110. And that's right now. That's what he's on pace for. He's second in home runs, second in RBI. He missed 2 weeks because he got plunked by Martin. He'd be close to 60 home runs, I think, and he'd be 130 RBI. You can't replace that power output there. Get the deal done. Now, our friend of the show here, who we've had on before, Pat Ragazzo from Sports Illustrated, he reported recently that the Mets, they're there with the money on Alonso. Alonso wants more years. And then Billy Eppler, he comes out and says, you can't trust the media. I think Billy Eppler should have just been like, maybe this is true, but I don't have the power here anymore as of October 1st. So don't ask me because I can't do anything here. Well, how do you think this scenario played out?
Well, okay. So with the Ragazzo report, I think he's dead on correct. I think Eppler is probably a little CYA covering his own rear end because, as you mentioned, David Stearns is going to be taking over October 1st. So when this season's over, you're going to have a new president of baseball operations. How does that look now that these negotiations are ongoing? I don't think Ragazzo's pulling that out of thin air by any stretch of the imagination. And I think his reporting is dead on. And the Mets are smart. I mean, what are you going to do? Trade Pete Alonso? I don't care what the Milwaukee Brewers or the Chicago Cubs were offering at the MLB trade deadline. You're talking about the most popular player on the team. And, the whole stuff about the clubhouse and everything that goes along with the team stunk this year. They were a terrible baseball team. I'm sure there were a lot of guys on that team that didn't necessarily get along because it was tough. It was tough as us fans, us covering the sport, to watch the Mets play baseball day in and day out. Imagine being on that team and the massive expectations, and then ends up being disappointment. He's the best. He's the face of the team. He's been a great representation on the field and off the field. He's been remarkably productive, as you mentioned, offensively. It'd be next to impossible to replace what he is able to do offensively, middle part of that lineup. And let's be honest, with not a ton of protection around him. It's not like that lineup is loaded top to bottom with one all-star after another, and Alonso's just taking advantage of seeing quality pitching. He hits bad pitching as well. He's going to get signed to a contract extension. And to be honest with you, he should be a Met for the rest of his career.
Absolutely. I think he's on track to be the greatest offensive Met of all time. I think he really has a shot to potentially hit 500 home runs if he keeps up this pace. And to me, he's been the captain of this team.
No doubt.
for the last year. So I think I would hope they take a page out of the Yankees book. And if they extend him, make him the captain. But I think Francisco Lindor would get a little upset if that happened.
Yeah, he might. I mean, and I don't know if they necessarily, and Nick, I don't know if they necessarily need to name him captain.
Mm-hmm.
He can't go anywhere.
No.
Like you can't go anywhere. Like if you're the Mets and you're not going to pay Pete Alonso and you think you're going to, well, the grass is greener on the other side. Good luck. Let's see exactly what you get back in return. Because that team not only has to trade for him, but then they have to sign him. He's been a great Met. He should be here long-term. I expect him that he will be. I think that report yesterday was dead on by Pat. And I think it was a case of that Billy Eppler didn't want that news out there at that time. That's why he so strongly came out and denied that report, is because, the horse was out of the barn.
Yep, he got caught. Good job by Pat. Moose, this has been great. Thank you so much for joining us here on Bleav in the Mets. Everybody go check out Moose, of course, on Picks 11 for baseball, football, basketball, hockey, everything there. WFAN Sunday mornings before football games, and WFAN on Saturdays for Rutgers. So the guy is very busy. Moose, anything I'm forgetting here?
No, that's it. That's it. I have to. No, I think I love you, Nick. Thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it. All the continued success here with the Mets podcast. I'm a huge supporter of yours, and anytime you need me, love coming on and talk a little baseball.
Appreciate it. All right, that's going to do it here for this episode of Bleav in the Mets. Make sure you're following us on all social media and YouTube at Bleav in the Mets, at BLEAVINTHEMETS. And I'm on Twitter at Nick_Durst, on Instagram at Nick's Food and Stuff. And until next time, everybody, let's go Mets.